Hello, everybody. I am going to be now doing a review of David Fincher's latest piece, Mank. Before I get started, I just wanted to uh, hopefully everyone is watching that 40-minute video that I did last night discussing the WB deal that went down. Hopefully we'll get some more news on that and we'll talk about that at length. But um, as promised, I was going to do a review of Mank, and we're going to do that right now. I just finished watching it, and I have my thoughts. But before we get into it, I actually have a connection to Mank that I actually haven't. I don't know if I've told. Yeah, I've told some people about it, but um, now the movie's out. I mean, I can. I think I can. I mean, I've always been allowed to say it, but it's just funny. I think it's an interesting story. Um, I knew about this project way back. I think like back in like November, October, before I think it was well publicized that what the new David Fincher film was going to be. Um, so I knew a lot about it before the movie was, being released and putting out photos and stuff, because in some fashion or another, I'm not in the movie, but I actually did audition and in some odd, weird fashion got casted as an extra for Mank. Now, what had happened was is that I had gotten the audition and I had put out some information about doing some extra work, and because they were filming in Los Angeles, so it was I believe it was like in December, like December of last year. Um, and what happened was that they actually were interested in me, and what they did is that they just asked me to go put out some information on a website, which I had verified and it was legitimate, so I wasn't getting scammed or anything. And I just put out my information, and basically what happened was that I was put in a pool of other extras that were backups. So there was the mains that were the ones who were on set, and then for any of the mains that did not appear on set or were having troubles on set, they would call one of us, the backups, to come onto set and fill in the gaps that they need. Um, and luckily, I was not on set because, probably would be distracting to say the least. But yes, so I did have that experience. So in a way, I was kind of casted in a David Fincher film. So kind of have uh, bragging rights, but whatever. So uh, so yeah, I knew about the project for a long time. I knew what the synopsis and everything. I knew who was in it. I'm pretty sure it was publicized like way before they were filming, so we knew like Gary Oldman and all these other people were in the film. But um, I did not know that it was going to be on black and white, so that was the thing that threw me off guard when I started seeing images from it. I was like, holy shit, it's in black and white. But um, but now it's released, and well, I have some thoughts. So the first thing I'm going to state right out the bat with Mank, that I think that everybody has been saying about it, and I completely agree with it, is that the cinematography and the production design are great. This is a gorgeously shot film. It has some amazing production design that I think is really true to the era that it's depicting, which is another positive. I think that the film really stays true to the era it's depicting, and I think that the atmosphere and the tone of it really feels like something that would have came out in the 30s or the 40s. So I think that front, the film works. From a performance standpoint, I think that Gary Oldman's commitment is full and realized, and I think that the character he brings a lot of development and characterization to Mank, and I think that um, there's a lot of interesting details that he presents and subtleties that I think really enhance the character of Mank. Um, well, before we continue, I just forgot to, I forgot to provide a synopsis to Mank. Just to put it in short, Mank is a biopic telling of one of the screenwriters of Citizen Kane, and how he came to develop the story of Citizen Kane and ultimately getting a screenwriting credit for the film. Um, and it tells the story of him throughout in 30s and 40s, and ultimately him coming to writing Citizen Kane. Um, which is another thing I have to say about the film that I found really compelling and really enticing was the screenplay. I found the dialogue to be very well realized, and I think that the back and forth, like it feels very much like Fincher in terms of how the camaraderie, back and forth. It feels kind of Sorkin also in terms of how the dialogue is delivered in some aspects, but I found that also really really well done. So so all around, I mean, the environment is fully realized. Gary Oldman is great in it. The screenplay is very well done. Um, so why is it that I don't really love the film as much as everybody else does? Um, it comes down to a couple of issues, story-wise, that I think don't do the film justice. Um, the first thing that I had an issue with was the pacing. Someone pointed this out, and I don't know if it's true. I have to rewatch it again. But the pacing that to someone feels very similar to how Citizen Kane's pace is. Now, Citizen Kane, what I remember from Citizen Kane, the reason why Citizen Kane I believe is one of the greatest films of all time, not just because people say it, because it's the stigma that everyone says like Citizen Kane's the greatest film of all time. I don't put it on that pedestal, but it definitely I consider it to be one of the greatest films of all time, not just because of its historical significance, but because it actually is a damn well made movie and that it has a fully realized approach. And I think that the pacing benefits it in many, many aspects. And Orson Welles, I believe, realizes the pacing that he is using for his film, and it doesn't become an issue. It doesn't feel long-winded. It doesn't feel boring. Every scene has some interest and has a meaning and has something to contribute to the story afoot. And I feel like at Mank, it's the same. It's the same thing. Every scene has a reason to be there. I just think that the pacing becomes problematic at points because I don't feel like I was as um, enticed as I should be with rather the dialogue that was being presented. I just didn't feel as enticed when the story was moving along, and I just feel that it was becoming a little tiresome at points. Um, the the other issues that I found with it was um, I think that the clarity in many aspects does not benefit a lot of scenes because there's a lot of times where the film presents a lot of dialogue in terms of the 30s and the 40s about what it is the 30s and 40s is about and what the development of the film industry was at this time and what a lot of people within the studios were thinking about when it came to films and how they would approach the cinematic landscapes. And I feel that that information was kind of muddled, and I didn't really get a real full realized approach to it. And I think that it just kind of hurt a lot of scenes. Hold on. Sorry, I just got a little distracted, but basically what I was saying about the clarity, because I think that I was not giving clarity to how I felt about the clarity. Um, the way that because the visual representation of the 30s and 40s is fully realized. We feel like we are in the 30s and 40s, like especially with the subtle details and how David Fincher depicts using his black and white format with all the ways of making the graininess approach to showing this format makes it feel a lot more realistic, and it feels a lot more like we're in within the 30s and 40s or watching a 30s and 40s film. The issue is that I just don't feel like I fully understood the politics of it. I think that the dialogue it on paper sounds great, but I just don't feel like I understand the dialogue as much as I need to. And I think that kind of hurts a lot of scenes because how they're saying it and what they're saying sounds right, but I don't know because the film doesn't really give me much clarity into trying to understand that dialogue much further. Um, which adds to another problem, which is that I think that the film feels rather distant than as personal as it feels because it's a centralized story. I mean, the movie is about Mank and about his journey into getting the screenplay of Citizen Kane created. But I never feel like I'm centralizing my perspective. I feel like the entire time I have to rely on a lot of other perspectives to understand this perspective. And I think that that kind of hurts it a lot because my last point that I think that the film bears that really hurts my experience was that there was too many subplots. There was too many subplots going around that really gave me a headache, and I was having a hard time grasping as to what was going on with certain scenes because I had to rely on information over here and information over there and information over there, and I just couldn't grasp all that information at first because the clarity is not there to begin with. So we don't have a lot of clarity with a lot of scenes with it, because let me let me re-clarify what I'm trying to say about the clarity of the film, because I feel like I'm not making it clear. Um, I'm not saying the dialogue itself is bad. The dialogue itself on paper sounds great, and how it's being vocalized is great. I just think that when it came to certain scenes and how we are learning a lot more about the 30s and 40s and what the politics of these times were for films and for cinema, and how the landscape changed over time, and how where there were political undertones in the studio systems, I just don't feel like I was able to fully grasp this through the dialogue. And I don't feel like I was given much clarity through that. And I think that translated also to characters, because a lot of the development for a lot of characters besides Mank, I kind of am kind of 50-50 on how their motivations on what their motivations are, because there comes a really pivotal moment in the film towards the end, and I feel like I'm supposed to know a lot of information, but I just feel kind of lukewarm. I don't really know too. I feel like I should know, but I don't really know. um, and as I said, that makes you feel rather distant from it. And also, it because of all that, it's because of there's too many subplots. There's just too many things going on at once, that are all trying to benefit this central perspective. But really, to create a centralized story, you just have to have that central perspective. And we had that central perspective through Mank. We just had so many other subplots that were wrapped around it for us to understand this central perspective, and that just makes it very muddled and very unclear, especially when those subplots are not even clear themselves. We don't even get what happens in the forefront, because we have to understand everything around here, but we can't even grasp anything over here. So when we get to here, it's kind of hard to put things into words. Um, but thankfully, Gary Oldman's full commitment to the role does give clarity in many other aspects to what Mank is, and what, because from what I gathered, to put it in like a sentence, he is an honest, he's a true, and he's a very good man that does some really stupid things. Um, and he never falters in being brutally honest to people. Like, he never once, like, his wife at one point is like when they go to like a meeting or like a party of some kind, he's like, "Can you just tone it down a little bit? Don't say anything. Just just say hi, just say nod, just try to have a good time." And we see how Gary Oldman's just trying to be all right, but then as the party keeps going on and on and on, he eventually just starts to you know let out his truth and everything. Um, and I think that Gary Oldman's commitment to the role, that full commitment to that role, is what gives the film much more clarity. Um, Anybody else in that role, I feel like we would have lost a lot more clarity, and I think that is sad, because I think that David Fincher crafted a really beautifully shot film with some amazing cinematography, and Jack Fincher wrote a very compelling screenplay, and it definitely stays true to the era it's depicting. Also, the person who plays Orson Welles, great job. I mean, the voice was down, the look looks pretty accurate to how Orson Welles looked at the time. Damn good job, whoever did Orson Welles in the film. Um, but Overall, though, I think that, like I said, it's a beautifully shot film. It's strongly acted, and I think it's compellingly written. But I don't think it provides as much clarity as it needs to. And I think that you have to understand many of the subplots that it has, and you can't. And because of that, the centralized perspective does become a bit muddled. But thankfully, due to Gary Oldman's strong performance and his subtleties, you do get an idea as to who this man is and how he was during these times, and ultimately what led him to writing the script. You get that from Gary Oldman. Anybody else who was doing this, you probably wouldn't have gotten as much information as you should have. Um, and It's not my favorite David Fincher film. There are many other favorite films of his that I have, but I think that this one is um, depicting its environment to the absolute best, um, I just wish I understood more of what that environment was through these characters and through um, certain points of dialogue, because as I said, it's a beautifully shot film. Believe me, it's a beautifully shot film, and um, the ensemble itself is good, but Gary Oldman is definitely what keeps the film um, much more fascinating because of the subtleties he has, and the writing itself on paper is great. Um, it just doesn't stick the landing as well as it could have, and through a lot more clarity and making it much more of a personalized story and centralizing itself on this one particular figure and removing all these subplots that it had underneath, I feel like we would have had something a lot more compelling, but in a lot more um, emotionally resonant and something a lot um, more fully realized. But in the end, it's something that is a beautiful thing to look at. But in terms of trying to grasp concepts and trying to understand things much more rooted, much more rooted, um, it feels like you have to know things beforehand to understand a film like this. And I feel like in many aspects that shouldn't be the case. The film should be able to tell you exactly what's happening and not feel like you're so distant in it in many aspects. So I think that it's a compelling film in many aspects, but I think it just doesn't stick the landing, and I think that it is uh, definitely a departure for Fincher. But I hope in the future, if he continues to do more films such as like this, or does other what wishes to explore other areas, um, I hope that clarity is the 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 one thing that he applies to his next film in Fixing, because this really is what killed the film for me. But I think that ultimately I still enjoyed it. I just think that clarity is really where the film's weakness is and what does kill it in many aspects.